Well, we've got a lot of stuff to cover on blood. And one of the reasons why we're not putting all this up on the board is we just have such a vast amount of stuff here involved. Human anatomy is gonna take a twist now, where we kind of started, especially into this biology 212, the human anatomy part 2, where we're going to begin to go into looking at some smaller areas like blood and then begin to expand that out into a lot larger areas. So what I'm going to give you today, this video and probably the next one, I'm going to kind of go a little bit random here, and but it's going to help you because these are going to be the informations that you're going to be tested on. So I want you to do, there's two things about a test. Number one, you want to do well on your test and you want to do well in this class, but after you're done with the class, you're going to need this human anatomy. So you're going to be, you're going to be nurses, you're going to be something, you're going to be somebody who needs this human anatomy. So we want to focus on the importance of the material as well as the fact that it's the test material. So we're going to stop in some places and kind of expand. So first of all, we need to know that in blood we have something called the hematocrit, okay? And it's Hematocrit. Now, the hematocrit is the percent of red blood cells in the whole blood. So we say, what's your hematocrit number? And that tells us that when we take blood, okay, remember we did the first video on blood, and I drew the diagram, and we had the plasma, and then we had the buffy coat, and then we had the red blood cells. So we need to know in a total amount of blood, okay, what's the percentage of that blood is red blood cells. Because red blood cells have hemoglobin in them, and they're carrying the oxygen, they're carrying iron, they're carrying the different nutrients that we need. And you have about 5 liters. That's actually a test question. How many liters of blood do we have? We have an average of 5 liters of blood. So let's think about that. Being scientific as we are, let's take a regular Coke is a 2-liter Coke. Okay, so we have basically 2.5 of the 2-liter Cokes. Okay, like we go to the store and we buy 2 liters of Coke or Dr. Pepper. We basically have 2.5 of those. Is about how much blood we have in our body. Now that's interesting because it's kind of like it's a little bit like oil in your car. You can have not enough blood in your body, but your body can make it with a little bit less blood. And you can have a little too much blood, a little more than 5 liters in your body, but it's a problem when you begin to get excess either way. So hematocrit, that's the percentage of red blood cells in your whole blood. And how much blood do we have? We have about 5 liters. Now, I mentioned the buffy coat earlier in video number 1. I wanted to mention, I mentioned that, you remember we had the red blood cells, and then the buffy coat was a very small amount. Well, that buffy coat, I told you, was made up of platelets and white blood cells. Well, I want you to know that another name for white blood cells, and probably what we'll use the most, is leukocytes. Leukocytes. So when I say leukocytes, I'm also talking about white blood cells. Now, each red blood cell, okay, so now we're talking each red blood cell contains 33% of its volume is hemoglobin, all right? And hemoglobin is a special molecule that actually allows us to, what does hemoglobin do? Hemoglobin actually is a molecule within the blood. 33% of each blood cell is hemoglobin, which allows us to absorb oxygen, okay, and keep that oxygen in the circulation of the blood system, and then give that oxygen out to the cells that are needing it. But then what's interesting is, then that hemoglobin is also able to carry, okay, it's actually also able to carry, keep going there and grab that, okay, film it at home, and that was my dog. And so the hemoglobin allows us to be able to transfer oxygen and carbon dioxide. So that's kind of neat. So each red blood cell contains about 33% of its volume hemoglobin. Now, what do we mean when we say nutrients in the blood? Because every cell in our body has to have oxygen and it has to have nutrients. So there are a ton of nutrients that we have to have in our body. Now, what does that mean? Okay, that means, well, you know, what does that mean? Does that mean that whenever we eat something and we take in the different nutrients that we need, we take in, we take in potassium, we take in the nutrients, we take in the vitamins, what does that mean? Does that mean that they absorb directly into the bloodstream? And the answer is no, not exactly. Actually, the body takes in and has to go through the digestive system, has to break down all these things, and then the liver actually synthesizes most of the blood nutrients. So most of the blood nutrients are actually taken into the body, and then they go into the liver, and then the liver synthesizes them into a form that we can use. Okay, so I go and I eat a cheeseburger, which sounds pretty good right now, and let's just throw in an order of sweet potato fries and a milkshake. So I go in there and, well, let's make that a chocolate milkshake while we're at it. And so I go in there and eat all that, but it has certain nutrients, even the calcium that I need, all these different things are broken down, and then the liver actually synthesizes these to a form that the blood that can actually absorb into the red blood cells and into the hemoglobin, and then also into the plasma, which carries 7% of the protein. So I want you to know that the liver synthesizes most of the blood nutrients. Now, in the blood, we have a measure of HDL and LDL. Now, these are different components of the actual blood itself. So when we talk about HDL, HDL has the highest amount of protein. Why is protein so important? Why do we always say, oh, we got to have protein if we don't have protein? Protein is actually the building block for cells. So protein is whenever we make a cell in the body, whether it's a lung cell, heart cell, brain cell, skin cell, whatever it is, the actual cell itself, okay, the actual cell itself, the cell membrane, the nucleus inside of the cell, all the parts that can make up the cell itself, okay, it would be like saying the metal in your car. Of course, nowadays it might be the plastic in your bumper, okay, but the metal in your car is kind of like the proteins that we have in our bodies. In order to make the cells, we have to have protein. So HDL is the part of your blood that contains the highest amount of protein. So that's really good that's really good. We want high HDL numbers in our body. High amounts of protein, HDL in our blood. Now what is LDL? LDL is the highest amount of cholesterol in our blood. So we usually say that the HDL is good blood compound. We say the LDL is bad. Now, we hear cholesterol. Now, the problem is we need some cholesterol. If we don't have any cholesterol in our body, then there's certain things like certain fat-soluble vitamins, vitamin D, that don't absorb into our body. So we have to have some cholesterol. We also have to have some cholesterol, and the cholesterol is the I'm going to loosely use the word glue, okay? But it is the substance that allows our red blood cells to be able to stay together as they go throughout the plasma and not be dissolved. So we have to have some cholesterol, but LDL type of the blood contains the highest amount of cholesterol, and HDL contains the highest amount of protein. All right. So now we were talking about the Buffy layer, and we're talking about platelets. Okay. So let's talk about platelets for just a little bit. What is the importance of platelets? Platelets are important for clotting, because as our blood goes, if we get a cut, or we get an internal cut, or we have something happen, then we've got to seal us off so we don't lose this blood. We have this 5 liters of blood. We've got to protect that. So we have something called collagen, C-O-L-L-E-G-E-N, and collagen, all right, collagen is a material in the blood that promotes platelet plugs. So collagen is what senses that we need to form this platelet plug, and all the platelets come and they begin to clot up an area where we don't want blood to be released from. So it's kind of interesting, okay? This is called coagulation, okay? It's called coagulation, where if I get a cut, I had one here the other day, I get a cut and I start bleeding. What causes me to stop bleeding? Well, I might even put pressure on there to slow that down. But what does the body do? Well, the body has collagen that says, okay, let's start this promotion of drawing platelets to that area and start sealing that up. and making a fiber, we'll just use the term loosely, a Band-Aid to fill that up. Now, what do we have to have for coagulation? We have to have calcium. So there's a lot of things. Calcium is needed for our bones, but calcium is also needed for coagulation. So it's kind of one of those things that once again the whole body's in balance. The whole body's in balance. Now, the average red blood cell lives for about 120 days. So here's this red blood cell. Once again, we got the parts of blood. We have the plasma, we have the buffy coat, we have the red blood cells. The average red blood cell lives 120 days, which, that's roughly 3 months, okay? So it doesn't mean it doesn't mean that every 120 days we just get all these new red blood cells. No, they're constantly changing all the time. They're constantly changing. So we're constantly producing new red blood cells, but yet on the same token, we're constantly getting rid of the old red blood cells. So 120 days. So we're constantly, like right now, as we speak, you are making new red blood cells to replace the ones that die off, and then you're losing red blood cells so that you constantly have a fresh source, because after a while, the red blood cell will not hold enough hemoglobin, okay? Will not hold enough hemoglobin and won't functionally work well to transport oxygen and carbon dioxide. So red blood cells live about 120 days. Now, what happens, okay? What happens when a red blood cell dies off? Okay, what happens when a red blood cell dies off? Well, we have a chemical in our body, okay, called biliverdin. It's B-I-L-I-V-E-R-D-I-N, biliverdin. Now this is kind of interesting because what it does is it's kind of a greenish pigment, and it actually pulls out some of the dead red blood cells and recycles them back to the bone marrow. The bone marrow, we're going to talk about that. The bone marrow itself is one of the producers of blood, and it's in the inside of the blood. The femur, the largest source of red bone marrow. You've got the solid bone on the outside, and on the inside you have the bone marrow. So the red bone marrow will actually produce red blood cells that actually trickle out through the bone. That's why if you look at a dried up femur bone, maybe even you've seen one maybe in a cow or something like that, but we have holes in them. There's reasons why there's holes in these bones, and that's where the blood is actually allowed to seep out the new red blood cells. So this biliverdin, which forms a greenish pigment, recycles some of the dead red blood cells back to the bone marrow. Now what happens to the other bone cells? Well, the liver and the spleen, okay, pick up the other dead red blood cells and actually kill them, and then send them directly to the urinary system, and then as we urinate, we get rid of those. So it's really interesting. So constant process of new red blood cells being produced, 120 days of them working, and then the biliverdin recycles some of those back, okay, so that we have some of that protein, some of those cells that we need to make new red blood cells. We get some of that back from the old blood cells. This biliverdin sends it back to the bone marrow to make new blood cells, and then the ones that we don't use by the biliverdin, the liver and the spleen remove those old dead red blood cells. So we're going to pick up with some more in the next video.